Fringe.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Fringe, and how about a little live stream? I guess we're live. We're coming in live. I was just about to do my YouTube video for tomorrow and decided, you know what? I just love hanging out with my community so much. We did it on Saturday night. I said, hey, let's just jump in and do it again. Let's have another sit down and chit chat with everybody, because boy, is there a lot going on in the country right now. Lots to talk about. Severo jumping in with a first. How you doing, brother? Welcome into the stream. Congregation. We're gonna get into stuff tonight, boy. Trying to press start without success. Well, you got to throw in your quarter, Chippy. Welcome into the stream. How you doing? Welcome to the stream. It's good to see you. Good to see you into the stream. I'll get into everything we're going to discuss in a few minutes. I'm going to let the chat fill up and the room fill up a little bit, because, you know, I just have this nasty habit of jumping on Twitter and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to do a stream right this minute. So I'll give people a few minutes to get in here and and fill the room before we get into all the juicy stuff. I hope you guys are having a great week. Boy, what a week it's been over here. I announced at the end of the stream on Saturday that the whole reason we did a Saturday stream and did not stream on our usual Sunday night for our weekly wrap, Jordan Peterson was in town. Dr. Jordan Peterson was here doing his show based on his 12 rules for life. And what a goddamn show that was. God, that was amazing. I was very fortunate enough to be invited to the show as Dr. Peterson's guest. And we met backstage and had a great conversation. Of course, everybody who's on Twitter has seen that I posted the picture we took together up on Twitter. I got into the show and I actually took a copy of his 12 Rules for Life book with me. The book has sold over 5 million copies, and boy, is it worth it, because I actually finished the book earlier today, and it's a fantastic book, especially for somebody like myself who has anxiety issues and depression issues. Reading this book and really hearing what Dr. Peterson has to say in terms of how you handle your marriage, how you handle people around you, how you handle the pressures of life, it really puts things into perspective. Now, when I got to the show, one of the gentlemen at the door, I went to look at the things that were being sold at the show, and one of the guys behind the desk asked, would I like to get an autographed copy of his book? And I said, well, I've got one with me, and I think I'll get it autographed at the end of the show. And they said, oh, he doesn't sign books anymore. So I said, well, so how do you get autographed books if he doesn't sign them anymore? And they said, well, you pay an extra $30 on top of the price of one of our books, and we give you a sticker that has his signature on it that you throw into the book. And I said, but that doesn't count as a signed book. It's just, you have a signed book with a sticker. How does that qualify as a signed copy? I feel like that's misleading. But anyway, they went on with their pitch. I said, no, thanks. I said, I'll get it signed. Don't worry about that. And sure enough, all it took was a simple asking of Dr. Peterson, hey, would you mind signing my book? And he was more than happy to. So now, not only do I have his fantastic book on 12 Rules to Life, but I've also got a signed copy alongside my VIP pass and ticket stub. What a show it was. Meeting him. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, the Christmas Story, where Ralphie wants the BB gun for Christmas and he sees Santa Claus and he's so intimidated by Santa Claus that he just freezes up and he can't get a word out. That was kind of like what it was like when Dr. Peterson walked into the green room at the end of the show. They took groups of 4 at a time, and eventually the room filled. So they took groups of 4 just to get people into the room one at a time. And I, of course, went in with Tamara Leach and her friends that came to the show. And we were standing in the room, and when Dr. Peterson walked in, it was like I froze, because, like, look, I've met politicians, I've met people from the convoy, I've met Theo Fleury, as well as Jamie Saleh when I've seen their Fire on Ice shows. I've been fortunate enough to hang out with them after their shows. Like, I've been around some pretty big name people, and that's not a flex. But the reason I bring that up is because when Dr. Peterson walked in the room, it was like rose-colored glasses, and I froze like the kid in the Christmas Story. I shook his hand and said, thank you so much for having me to the show. And he says, yeah, and you are? And I told him my name, and he goes, oh, my new friend, my new friend that I met online. And I said, yes. And he says, great, well, welcome in. And I gave him my books. He had a good laugh. uh, and showed his wife, who also does part of his show with him. She speaks as well. And it was fantastic to hear what Kat had to say. Um, really great show. I would really recommend, if you have the chance to get your hands on tickets and see Jordan Peterson live, it is such a good show. The intellect off of this man is just amazing. But he truly enjoyed my books, and I think he's maybe gonna pass them on to a few people. We'll see. I'm very fortunate that we now get to keep in touch, and hopefully I'll go see him again in May when he comes to town for his other show. But yeah, just an amazing meeting, amazing meeting. And now as we get on with this stream, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about how cool that was because I'm still glowing from it. But we do have things to talk about tonight. Chippy saying your books are good. Thank you, man. I appreciate the compliment. Thank you so much. I sat in on a stream with Veterans for Freedom last night, V4F, and we had a roundtable and talked about my books. We had a Q&A. It was very enlightening stream to be in because like I'm not used to being in places where people are talking about my stuff. Uh, I try to stay, despite what you see on this channel. Anytime I'm doing a plug or anytime I'm doing anything, I try to keep myself on a bit of a level playing field to say that, look, I'm just a guy. I just wrote a book. It took off. We're very grateful for the support we've gotten from those books. But when it comes to people telling me, hey, I'm a fan, hey, I like these things, you changed things in our home. One of the vets were telling me last night that he read the book to his kids and as well as his nephews. And he said, you know, it really shed light on a dark time in their house. That is probably the nicest things I could ever hear. And it's hard to believe that that's not only a tell of the work I've done, but the work that my illustrator Kaide has done as well. To know that we've lifted people's spirits in any form, even if it was one person, makes all of this worth it at the end of the day. And I was so grateful to sit amongst vets who I've always said come first. Anytime I'm asked to do something with veterans, of course, the answer is always, as long as I'm not, you know, occupied with something else, then of course I have time for them. They always come first in my world. I was so grateful to sit down and talk with those guys. It was great. It was fantastic. Joe, Joe. I know I do that every time he comes in. Joe jumping in. How many countries have foreign influence over elected officials? That is a good question. And that is something I want to get into tonight. I think that's going to be one of my videos for tomorrow too, as I go into greater depth with it. But boy, I don't want to say a surprise because I mean, look, we all had our opinions. I think that's what it is that everybody has their opinions when they think that, you know, there's influence going on, or you see Trudeau's ties to the Chinese. He's made no qualms with saying that he has an admiration for China and that they can turn their economy around on a dime and go green on a dime. And uh, he's definitely not silent about it. That, you know, everybody kind of says, well, I think there's something going on there, or there's been interference or payoffs or censorship from China or Chinese spies. But then when it comes to light, like it has in the last day or two, it's like it hits you like a double whammy. Like it's like you knew but you didn't know. You know what I mean? Like it like hits you like I don't know. I always feel like I look at it in a what if scenario, and then when it happens, it's like I'm not surprised, but at the same time, I'm surprised. It's like I can't believe it was actually happening. So it's come to light now that the Trudeau Foundation received, I believe it was $200,000. Again, I'll have all this in my video for tomorrow. I'll get the definitive numbers and facts. That's again, the live streams are more just a place to hang out and chat about things. But I believe it was a $200,000 donation to the Trudeau Foundation, as well as over $1 million in funneled money to win an election to help. I believe it was Han Dong, Mr. Han Dong, the Liberal MP, who was put in place by China to sit and win his seat in the last election and put him within the House of Commons, to put him in Parliament. And it has now come to light that the money that funded his campaign, the money that so I don't like using the word rigged the election, but it's interference. All came from the CCP. I love how all the politicians are saying Beijing now. They don't want to say China. It's Beijing. You have to say Beijing. You have to be PC with it now because you can't say the CCP or China. You have to say Beijing. It's the CCP. Come on, guys, grow a spine. I would, after the comments that Polyev made about Christine Anderson and the uproar that went on about it, I was hoping that these guys would now come out because I mean, look, this is a huge scandal. I honestly think this is the one that's going to take them down. But I thought some of these guys would stop being so PC with things at this point and stop trying to say, "Well, it's Beijing, guy." No, 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 no. Guys, come out and just call a spade a spade. Let's get down to the meat of this. It's corruption at the end of the day, and it makes me wonder when you look at the U.S. and the voting machines, even though those voting machines are made in Canada and provided through a Canadian company, Dominion Voting. With the discrepancies that Donald Trump brought up at the end of his campaign run last term, and the missing ballots and the faulty numbers and the ballots being pulled out from underneath desks. It comes back to Joe's question of how many countries have foreign influence, where, it's like nobody wants to talk about it until it's useful. Like I always compare it to, uh, here we go with it. It's pronounced China, 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 as Trump says. It's China. It's funny because I treat it like a poker game where guys have like a card they don't want to play until it's time to play it. And I said it in one of my other videos when we were talking about how the lab leak has come out and been confirmed by the energy department in the U.S. And Fauci is silent. And look, again, just like the Chinese influence, we knew it was a lab leak for the longest time. Rand Paul has been fighting Fauci for the last year and a bit on this lab leak theory. And Fauci's only answers were, I am the science. There was no, again, these guys never show any documents. They never show any proof of anything. They just run their mouths and say, oh, you're a racist if you talk about these things. Sound familiar? So what it appears, what my guess is going to happen now that we're getting into U.S. election territory, with Trump wanting to run again, whether it's Trump or DeSantis, you're going to see the Democrats start to attack the Republicans and say, this was Trump's vaccine. This was Trump's fault. He didn't call out China from the beginning. He didn't want to talk about lab leaks. He didn't want to talk about all these things. He just wanted to find this vaccine, which is now hurting people. It's going to be used to weaponize with fear the thought of electing a Republican next time around. And when you look at Trudeau now that the lab leak has come out, now that these documents are coming out of Chinese interference, there's word going around that Jagmeet's breaking off his contract with the Liberals, and I think an election will be called. It's all a matter of convenience. The cards are starting to stack in my favor, so now is the time to talk about things. And that's the problem at the end of the day, is that we need politicians that are running for the sake of the people, not for their pockets, not for, well, I know about this corruption, but I'll keep my mouth shut until it's convenient for me to bring it up, or it's convenient for me to use it as a weapon against somebody else. The whole reason you're there, and I've said it from the get-go, that politicians, and they say, well, we don't like to be called public servants anymore. You're elected by the people. You're put there by voters, and you're not put there to fill your pockets. You're not there to run your hidden agendas. It sucks that we live in a society of so many blank-minded people that just put up with this, that say, well, when the elections come around, we're not going to do anything about it. We're not going to, I hear the claim all the time, well, my vote doesn't matter. And it's funny that that's brought up because I was talking earlier about my sit down with Jordan Peterson. When he was doing his show, he was talking about that. And he said, the onus is on us for Trudeau and for the shape of our system right now, because it starts at the municipal level. If you allow these people into your city, the woke teachers, the woke officials that run your town that spread this out to provincial, then they spread it out to federal. It starts at a municipal level. If we have, and this brings me into Danielle Smith and everything else, that if you start to say, well, we're not going to elect these liberal officials anymore, and we're not going to elect these woke politicians in our city anymore, these ward councilmen for our cities, we're not going to listen to them anymore. If you have a city council that isn't corrupt, and you have a mayor that isn't corrupt, and then you go to your provincial election and you elect somebody who isn't woke, who doesn't believe in these nonsense politics, that has a proven track record to say, we're not going to put up with this and we want Canadians' best interests at heart. Am I saying that there's a politician who's not going to lie to you? Absolutely not. They're natural born liars. I believe there's a degree of narcissism that comes into any politician to run. Absolute narcissism and self-reliance to run their own agendas. But we as people need to start saying that our votes matter. If you believe that federally, I can understand the argument. But when we talk about municipally, provincially, your votes have a weight, and they dictate a lot of what goes on federal. There are federal policies that go through, but at the end of the day, more provincial policies affect your day-to-day life, more municipal policies affect your day-to-day life than federal. And that's not to say federal shouldn't be looked at, but Dr. Peterson had a very good point when he was talking about how it affects everyone, even at the municipal level, and we should always be doing something about it. He says, if it bothers you, get on a council, get on a board. Start at the bottom, learn a bit about what's going on in your community. If you're fed up with things, try to be a part of it, even if you're assisting with a ward councilman or an MLA that you agree with. Get involved, because everybody wants to sit and complain, and everybody wants to sit and say, hey, I don't like what the hell's going on, but I'm not going to speak up. I'm just going to sit at home and complain. Well, nothing gets done when you do that. It's here we go. Don't forget Operation Warp Speed, and that's what I think is going to be weaponized in the next election. Is they're finally going to come out and start discussing the effects of vaccines and injuries and the lab leak, and oh look, it's all his fault. It's all Trump. It's the onus is on him. If Fauci is the science, I am Iron Man. I'm Batman. No, I will. We'll see. Hobby Hand says it's not going to happen. That's the rub. The truth is devastating to those in power, and it's coming out now. They're about to dump anyone who was in power with the coup. Well, to an extent, but again, with interference, we're going to see where that goes. I think, when I was in this roundtable with V4F, or Veterans for Freedom, last night, somebody asked me what my thoughts were on Pierre Poilievre, because in my books, we've kind of taken a lighthearted stance at Poilievre and the Conservatives. And when I met with Pierre, I told him flat out, the only reason I haven't done anything yet is because you haven't given me anything to do yet. My radar's on all of them. And I've even said it in videos, streams. I'm not worried about calling Pierre out and questioning what's going on. I think everybody should. But I feel like he shot himself in the foot with the opportunity that he had with Christine Anderson, because he has completely flip-flopped on the issue at hand with his voters. There's people who think that he supports the freedom movement, that he supported the truckers. If everybody remembers when he was interviewed going into Parliament, we talked about it on the last stream, where he was walking into Parliament on the steps in mid-January last year. And he was asked, what's your opinion of the truckers? And he says, I support protests of anybody who wants to do it legally. He was on overpasses with his wife, shaking the hands of truckers and thanking them for coming out east to protest the government. He thought it was important that they were speaking up. He walked with James Topp. And then Christine Anderson comes to Calgary and comes to Ottawa and everywhere else in Canada she visited, and they're told, well, she shouldn't have come at all, and we condemn her because she's anti-Semitic. Well, I don't see anything that she's done that shows anti-Semitism, and maybe I'm oblivious to it, but what they've done at that point is said, this lady who speaks about the same freedoms, the same rights, the same tyranny of governments, we're going to disagree with. We're going to call her out. Um, I feel like look, do I still support Pierre as a candidate for a future election? I would, only because I think he's bringing to the table a lot of solutions to our problems. But I feel like he's really shot himself in the foot when it comes to people's stance on him as a leader or a person or representative. When I was in this thing with V for F last night, I said I can understand why he would take that stance from a political point of view. But I also don't agree with it at the same time, if that makes sense. When I met with Pierre, it was for him to get a signed copy of my book. I had a few minutes to chat with him, and he was a fan. And we had been trying to arrange something to work together for a while. Our schedules clashed, and I was told by his assistant, his handler, we'll take a photo, but you can't have your book in the photo. And a lot of that stems back to the controversy that went on when Jeremy McKenzie was spotted taking a photo with him right before his leadership vote. And, he's now running for PM, and they want to limit anybody going on Twitter or anybody going on social media saying, "Oh, look who he's with now, and look what he's doing." And so I get that end of it. It's like playing 5-dimensional chess at all times. You have to watch who you're with, what you say. And obviously somebody gave him some kind of push to say, you should denounce this person. You should step back. For whatever reason, they saw it as something beneficial to their campaign. It may not be his personal opinion, but they denounced it thinking it was going to help their campaign. And I honestly feel like it threw a wrench in the system, to be honest. Hopefully they know what they're doing, because is PPC the answer? Not right now. I think that if PPC were to really focus on what they're doing with their platform and how they want to go up against the government and kind of build their numbers. People said the NDP were never going to grow as a party, and now look at them. Now they stand alongside the Liberals to form some form of a majority government. I think the PPC can grow. It's just you're going to split a vote right now that's crucial to get Justin Trudeau out. And I'm not saying that the PPC don't belong in power. I think Max needs to reevaluate his stance on things, and he needs to reevaluate the position of his party. Jasper, Mr. Sunshine Baby, actually had a really good interview with him yesterday. I'd highly recommend going to check that out, because he actually called out Max and said, you need to do more videos. You need to do more things that people can relate to and show how much your party wants to attack what's going on. And build and he had a very good point. And it was actually nice to see Max sit there and take the criticism and roll with it. I kudos to Jasper for having that interview the way he did, because I thought it was fantastic. And again, I'd recommend going to check it out. But the problem at the end of the day is, what's that going to mean for Pierre and his party going forward should an election be called? Because I have a feeling with this Chinese CCP scandal, not Beijing, I got a feeling that an election is going to be called very soon. I was on the fence at the beginning of the year saying, yeah, maybe we'll see something. I don't know. But now I'm more sure than ever we're going to see an election probably called in the next 6 to 8 weeks, I would think. Maybe sooner. I always say 6 to 8 because I give it time for like tensions to rise and more people to point fingers and Parliament, question periods. Jagmeet also, again, I've heard that he's breaking the connection with the Liberals, but I haven't seen anything in the news yet, so I don't want to confirm that. That interview with Max was hilarious. I don't know about hilarious. I think what it was is what he needed. Now, I'm in contact with Jasper sometimes off stream. We've stayed in contact since I appeared on his show. And I'll be honest, he's a great person to have around when you need somebody to call it like it is. And he's done that with Max. He feels comfortable enough with Max that he can say, hey, I respect you, but at the same time, I feel like you're making a mistake here. And I give props to Max for listening to him. I think that it needed to be said, because when you're somebody like Maxime Bernier and you go on all these interviews and all these shows and everybody's kissing your butt and telling you how great things are, and then they throw you a couple of softballs, but also a couple of questions that need to be answered. I think sometimes you need those kind of interviews where someone's going to say, "Hey, you need to shape up, man." And you got to get it together. So I give props for Jasper to do that. Like, this wasn't scripted or anything. So for him to do that and risk breaking those ties possibly with Max, I give him credit for, because that could have went one of two ways. The way that it went after he did it, or it could have completely flip-flopped. Max could have said, "I don't have to take this from you. I'm walking out." And that would have been the end of the interview. He nailed his accent. Yes, that was funny. That was a funny part of the video. I'll give that. I was more talking, what wasn't hilarious was the kind of the rude awakening, and I think that was perfect. I think Max needed that, and I think Jasper brought it around in a very good way. I think that it was very constructive, but also what he needed to hear. MG, welcome into the stream. If we could, 100,000 people to start a corporation and start buying Canadian land, $1 a day. We can buy land every day until the people own Canada. Well, God, that would take a lot of work. I don't know about that. I mean, I get what you're saying. God, that'd be tough. That would be tough. But yeah, in terms of an election, I think, I mean, like I said, I don't want to touch too much on the scandal itself, because I'll be doing a video for tomorrow about that. And I want to get that out as to what we're looking, what barrel of the gun we're looking down here, and what could be the possibilities moving forward. But I want to make sure I have my facts in front of me. But one other thing I wanted to touch on tonight, and one thing that's really got my piss to a boil over the last 2 days, is I keep seeing this child grooming stuff, this drag time story hour. I want to say it right off the bat. I have no qualms with what somebody wants to do with their life sexually, what their preferences are. You do you. Live your best life, so long as you're not hurting anybody. And when I say so long as you're not hurting anybody, well, children are the number one thing that I worry about getting hurt. And it's being used more and more now to bring this crowd into mainstream, so to speak. We have a huge problem in Calgary, where I'm from, because we have a very liberal mayor. I don't know how she got in, or how she remains in power, but she implemented a law during the lockdowns that if you're out protesting against the COOF, you could be fined, you could be jailed. And it was an emergency power granted to the city during the pandemic. Well, the pandemic's been over in Calgary for almost a year. It'll be a year in March. Well, mid-March. I believe it was like March 18th or 20th or something. So we're approaching the 1-year mark of the end of Alberta's pandemic. And they haven't rescinded this bylaw yet. They haven't given it back to the people, because why would they? Why would they take away a law that's so convenient for them, that, hey, if we don't agree what you're protesting for, we can fine you and we can throw you in jail. We can arrest you. It's sad. And I don't agree with, well, let me rephrase it before I go in and put my foot in my mouth. I've been to a drag show. My cousin took me to a drag show back in my 20s. She said they're hilarious. You should come see one. It's funny to see, and it's entertaining. Like, don't get me wrong. It's definitely something to laugh at and say, yeah, it's funny, because it was outrageous. That was around the time when the Birdcage came out, with Robin Williams and what's the other guy's name? Nathan something. He did the voice of Timon in The Lion King. God, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, Nathan Lane. There we go. Thank you, Mystical. Thank you, Nathan Lane. So right around the time of the birdcage, I remember watching the movie and laughing my ass off. And my cousin said, my cousin's part of the LGBTQ community, and said, you should come to the bar with me one night and see one of these drag shows. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll come along. And they're funny. But the thing about that was that this was in a bar where you have to be 18 years of age or older, that you are a consenting adult, and that you go in to see. And I catch a lot of heat with my material that people can't understand. The things that I've put out are meant for adults that were written in the context of children's books. But I'm always told that I'm indoctrinating kids, that I'm a terrible human being because I'm putting politics in front of children. And I've tried to clear it up as much as possible anytime I sit down with somebody that, hey, I didn't write this stuff for children. You're misconcepting what I've done. You're twisting my work. Um, I don't know if we have to start putting it in print in our books, that in our disclaimers or something. I don't know. Anyway, what I don't agree with is this constant push to expose children to a sexual nature. And if I look back at the last 25, 30 years of my life, it went from accept the gay community, which I'm all for. And then it was gay marriage, which again, I think is fantastic. They have every right to be as miserable as the rest of us. So I agree. I think they should be allowed to get married if they want to be. They should be allowed to get divorced if they want to be. Um, but it's grown over the last, especially over about the last 10 to 12 years, where it's, well, now we want to identify differently. We want to have different genders. There's all these millions of genders, even though, well, we've talked about that before. They want to go to, hey, I identify as a toaster now. You have to be nice to me because I think that I'm a toaster and appliance. I've seen people who put animal ears on their head and say I'm a fox or something. Like, it gets a little silly to the point where you start asking yourself, am I supposed to buy into this? MG says it is freedom of choice. And I get, I do agree with freedom of choice, and nobody's, forcing these parents to take their kids to these things, but I believe that it's child abuse. Um, this should be like, it's kind of like saying if I put on a pornographic movie in my home and my kids walk into the room and watch it, that it's my freedom of choice to allow them to see it or not. Uh, there's a reason you had to be a certain age to go to the strip clubs. There's rules for a reason, and developmental minds, children have the right to be children, I think. And people can, if somebody wants to say I identify as a Yeti or whatever, you can identify that all you want, but I don't have to treat you differently or pretend that you are so that you can be happy with yourself. I don't need to play silly little games like this, right? So that's kind of where I draw the line, is that I can agree that you have a right to feel that way, but I don't have to, coddle you with the notion that you want to feel this way. Now, this tweet came across from Theo Fleury today of, look at what's going on here. This is a child sitting in this chair. This is a child and a bunch of parents sitting around. And this is what they're being exposed to. Hang on. Let's get the volume out of there. Like, this kid, look how confused she looks. While the parents are, oh, look how great we're being to our children. Isn't this fantastic, kids? The kid's essentially getting a lap dance. And they do these events. Like, you have to accept our sexuality all of a sudden. Why is it important that this, what I'm assuming is about a 5 or 6 year old kid, understand sexuality? How is this okay? It says she asked her mom to get a better view. And then, oh, there's me and Dr. Peterson. If you don't have Twitter and seen that, God, that was amazing. I posted this one that was put out by Theo as well. This is another show. Is that a sex swing? I mean, this guy's in a G-string. How is this appropriate for children? And why are so many parents now, like, he's wearing a thong and parading around for kids? I just don't understand why this is such a big thing right now, and why it's so important that hey, children need to understand gender, they need to understand sexuality, they need to be exposed to this at a young age. And it's for nothing more than to groom them. It's for nothing more than to confuse children. Because I remember the adults in the room are ill. Well, I think what should happen is that like somebody had an idea today when they said people should stand outside these events and take pictures of the parents and shame them online. Call child protective services. You know, it's have them stripped of their children. It's I don't agree with ruining people's lives, but this is just pathetic. It's sad. It's let kids be kids. It's how long before they legalize child porn? Well, they're already doing that. They're already saying that pedophilia is a illness, or not an illness, a sexual preference. They're saying in some places in the US that it's a sexual preference and that you should be okay with it if that's what works for them. It's the same thing where it was mentioned earlier by MG, freedom of choice. Well, they're choosing, that's their sexual preference. So you shouldn't jump on anybody that's into children. Yeah, you should. It's illegal. It's it's disgusting. The biggest problem we have in Calgary right now, and one of the things I've tweeted out, I've called my ward councilman. Um, Here's one of the big problems I've got here. Saturday, March 4th at the Calgary Library, in conjunction with TD Canada. So TD Canada Trust is hosting an all-ages drag queen story hour at their Southwood location from 11 to 11:45. It's sure to be a wickedly fun event for the whole family. Make sure to come dressed in your best outfit. Now, I've been told that Without Papers Pizza was being sarcastic when they wrote this because we're not allowed to protest it. I believe Theo posted a pastor today that was arrested for opposing. He was arrested for imposing or trying to speak up against the last drag time story. Here we go. Here, we've even got captions. Where'd the captions go? Captions aren't there. So I can't get audio during these videos because of the way StreamYard works. I haven't figured out the problem with it, but we'll minimize it so you can see the tweet. Cops woke Pastor Derek up banging on his door and threatening to issue a warrant for his arrest for Derek's recent involvement in peacefully protesting all-age drag shows for children. Help spread awareness. Our mayor and Theo tweeted out, the police are now supporting the normalization of pedophilia. Wow, Jody Gondek has really crossed the line. Stolen elections have consequences. I couldn't agree more. It's horrible. It's horrible to see this, and especially like I feel for Theo because if you don't know about Theron Fleury, world famous NHL player, one of the top 50 of all time statistics wise, he was assaulted by his coach as a child. I can't imagine how traumatic it is for a guy like this to watch these clips and see what this world's turning into. It's turned from, like I said, from gay rights to gay marriage to support how we identify to now you have to accept this or you're phobic. What I was saying before I showed that clip is my nephew came to me once and he said to me, I guess I'm gay now. And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, now, first off, if he was, I'd fully support it. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, well, this guy asked me out at school and I was told I had to say yes or else I'm phobic. Now, this was in 2016, roughly 2017. And he says, I've been told that I'm phobic if I didn't say yes. And I said, well, are you attracted to guys? And he said, not really. No. I said, do you want to touch him or do anything sexual with him? And he said, no. He says, I've held his hand so that he feels better. But my teacher told me that I'm a phobic. I'm homophobic if I don't accept his advances. What are we teaching our kids? How is that okay? I told him, stop leading this guy on. This guy's going to think you're into him, and you're going to have to either do something with him or break him in half of his feelings and say, I went out with you out of pity. It's gross. It's gross to do this to another human being. I've seen the argument online of people saying, well, if you don't want to go out with a trans person, you're phobic. No, I'm not phobic. Trans people have their preferences. I'm allowed to have mine. That it's a one-way street with people like this. And that's what is upsetting now, is that now all these libraries, I don't understand, especially in our town, why these libraries are so focused on, hey, let's have drag time story hour. Let's bring in parents and their children and have men in G-strings rub their bums in their face. I don't get it. I really don't understand the over-sexualization of children and why it's so important to these people. Aside from trying to pollute their minds and brainwash them. It's they're getting funded. Well, it shows in that one tweet, TD Canada Trust is funding them. And Calgary tax dollars with the public library are funding them. I can see it as a way to coerce sex on an unwilling party. And that's what that's what I say too. It's sad and it's disgusting. It's I've called my ward councilman for my neighborhood and I said, is this where my tax dollars are going? We fund the public library. I don't want my taxes going to fund pedophilia on children. I don't agree with that. And I left a message saying, do you agree with that? Maybe I'll see what he has to say. And maybe I'll bring my ward councilman onto my show. Maybe we could interview him to speak on behalf of a councilman in my city as to what he thinks about these things. I don't think he'd have the gusto to come online and state his opinions, but I'd definitely like to. I was joking around last weekend when news came out that the mayor was going to fine people and arrest them for protesting drag story hour. My mayor openly supports pedophilia. And I said, we need somebody to clean up this town, and nobody's stepping up. I said, maybe I should step up and run for mayor of Calgary. I've got no desire to step into the political world in terms of representation, but Jesus Christ, when I see things like this, I start going, God, maybe I need to find a way to do that, because this shouldn't be allowed. This shit has to stop. And I keep thinking about what Jordan Peterson said again about it starting at a municipal level. Maybe that's what needs to happen. We need to get people in at the municipal level that say, not in my backyard. We're not going to, again, if somebody said to me, I have a sexual preference, I'd say, good for you. I'm happy for you. Go have it in your home, have it in your life, but don't expect people to enjoy that. It's the same as when people were talking about getting the hokey pokey. I used to say, if that's what you want to do, if you feel you need an injection to protect you, go get it. But I shouldn't have to just to make you feel better. It should be my decision. It's my body. Same with this stuff. It's my life. If I don't want to have that around in my life, I have the right to say, I'm not keen to that. I don't prefer that. I sat at a school meeting with my kids' school and asked the school, because there was a teacher who was removed for talking about gender to a student. And I said, is this what I'm to expect at this school? Because my kids' school that they're both in, both my kids are under 10. I've got 3 kids. They're all under 10, but both of them that are in school are under 10. And their current school only goes to grade 4. So I sat in a PTA meeting and said, do I have to worry that my kids are going to come home talking about gender identity and sexuality at such a young age? Is that what's being discussed in this school? Now, the school has fully guaranteed that they do not talk about race. They do not talk about gender. They do not talk about any of those things in this building. They teach straight academics, and I'm very grateful for that. Now, that doesn't mean I necessarily believe the words that come out of one's mouth. But if I were to ever catch that, I mean, we've had talks with our children that if a teacher ever mentions these words to you, you're to tell us immediately. Um, no matter what they say, that you're going to get in trouble or that you're not to talk about it outside of school or any of that stuff, you have to tell mom and dad. And my kids are well aware of that. Because if that happened, I would immediately homeschool my children. I would pull them out, and I'd probably find a way to talk to a lawyer about suing the school board, because it has nothing to do with being phobic. It has to do with what's appropriate for children. If you ask yourself when you were in school, if these things were being discussed with us, how our parents would have felt about it, I can guarantee you right now, it would have been hell on earth. It would have been scorched earth on the school. The parents would have went ballistic. If I came home and said to my parents, "Oh, we had drag queens at the school today, and they were reading us books and dancing around and wearing thong underwear," my parents would have probably knocked my teacher out. They wouldn't have put up with that. It's you can't do that to kids. It's I used to volunteer for the CPL before the pandemic, but not anymore. Well, there you go. I have cousins who homeschool. I know a lot of people who homeschool, and that's great. If it works for them, that's great. I don't listen. My kids drive me to drink sometimes. I love my kids, but as a full time father with 3 kids, I've talked about it before that my wife has her career, and the whole reason she has her career is because she wanted it. She enjoys going to work for 8 hours a day. She enjoys what she went to school for. She likes the oil and gas industry, and she we sat and talked about it when we had our second child, what her plans were, because daycare was going to cost a fortune. Daycare in our city is about $1,000 per kid per month, so we were looking over 2 grand for kids to go to daycare. Basically, if both of us worked, one of our paychecks, or 2 of our paychecks every month would basically go to daycare at the time. And I just said I don't want to go to work and only have $300 left over every month just for my kids to be in somebody else's house. That's stupid. So we talked about it, and my wife just said, "I love my children, but I'm not a homebody. I can't do this." And I said, when I was growing up, my mom was always home, and when my dad lost his job and built his own business, he worked from home as well. We always had at least one parent home all the time, and if we could find a way to afford it, even if it meant we made cutbacks, it was worth it. Because if the kids are ever sick, if they ever have a problem, somebody's there to pick them up from school, to be around them. And then we had our third child, and it was like, okay, well, now one of us always has to stay home. Um, but I was working on my literature at the time, and I just said to my wife, "You know what? If you're comfortable with it, I'll stay home with the kids." I'm a big kid. If you can't tell with the room that's behind me, I'm a big kid. And my wife tells me all the time, it's the one thing she's always loved about me ever since we met in high school, is that I can be grown up when I need to be. There is a business side to me, and there is a very knowledgeable, educated person sitting in front of you as you watch this stream. But when it comes to day to day life, I can drop the responsibilities list and be a giant child. And I think that's great with my children, that we get to play and have fun and do all these cool things. Um, I'll pick my kids up on a Friday and we'll go to Toys R Us and buy Nerf guns and come home and have a war. Like we we have fun in this house, and I'm grateful for that time, because there will come a time when they're older where uh, they've got friends and they don't want to be around mom and dad anymore. So I'll take the years I can get. Um, but not all families are that fortunate, and I don't know how I'd feel if my kids were having that nonsense shoved in their face. If I had to worry about somebody touching them inappropriately and saying, "Oh, this is okay. This is normal." It's it's scary. It's really scary. The government's running around with Canadians' credit cards and on a spending spree, and we can cancel or charge them with fraud as he spent our money for himself and his friends. Yeah, that's true. Little Johnny can barely read, but he can lap dance at the 5th grade level. That's what it's turning into. Mystical is at home as well. Good for you. Good for you. Uh, Goretti Rogers, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I stayed with my kids because of the same reason. Attachment is important when they're young and not when they're teens. Yeah, I fully agree. I think kids, like, look, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And I had a routine in my life. I'd go to school, play hockey in the winter, soccer in the summer. On the weekends, I'd rush to the video store to rent, the newest Nintendo game or something, and I'd have friends over and we'd sit in the basement and play video games. We'd ride our bikes around the community. Our parents would tell us, "Go play hide and go seek, go do whatever you're going to do, but be home when the lights come on outside." Um, there were no cell phones, there was no internet, there was no anything. It was a great time to grow up because we got to explore, we got to find ourselves and be kids. We got to be kids. I had a really crazy, awesome childhood, and I tell my parents that. Well, until my mom passed, I tell my dad that still, that I'm so grateful for the childhood they gave me. They always thought, hey, we were just getting by, but growing up as a kid, I loved the opportunity I had as a kid. Whenever can I have a sleepover with friends? Invite a few friends over, and we'd take over the basement for the weekend. It was a great time to grow up, and I don't see that with kids nowadays. And there's so many pressures being thrust upon our children these days, especially when you look about how it affected them mentally with 2.5 years of being locked in their house. Kids are lacking social skills now. I have a friend who I grew up with who recently separated from his wife, and he said to me, "I don't even know how to date because everybody does it on a phone now. Everybody does it online." He says, "I don't want to meet some stranger on a phone line." It's it's scary where the world has gone. Being much older than you, I am among the first students to receive sex education in school. I hated it and it was very uncomfortable. Yeah, so we got sex ed, I think, when I was in about grade 9. So I would have been 14, 14 at the time. They did the old condom on the banana and said, if you ever do these things, be safe. And the teacher was very awkward about it. He didn't want to have those discussions with us. The students didn't want to put up with it. It was about a 10-minute lesson, and then we moved on. It wasn't it, it wasn't a big thing. And they always said, if you have any further questions, go ask your parents. That was the great thing about that age. It was the golden age. Um, so much freedom in the 60s and 70s. I heard about that too. I hate to imagine what future generations will be like as adults. Yeah. MGTOW, men go their own. Are we talking about men going their own way? Is that what we're supposed to? I don't know much about that. I know it gets slammed, but yeah, I worry about this drag story hour with kids. Um, I know I've talked to Theo about coming back on the show, and I'd like to address those things um, when he comes back on the show, if he's willing to talk about it. Because again, as somebody who's a victim of child abuse and sexual assault, I think hearing his take on it would be very beneficial. Um, I'm sure there's a lot of anger, and rightfully so. What happened to Theo? I've read his books, and what happened to Theo is devastating. And God, I feel horrible for him. But I'd like to get his opinion on this stuff, especially since it's going on in our city. Um, I love my city, but I can't understand for the life of me why our tax dollars are going to funding this stuff. I was in grade 7 and I found it horribly awkward. I thought it was a private discussion that should have been at home with my parents. And that's so most of the school I know sent letters home because my dad had to have the chat with me, the talk. And keep in mind, these were in the days where I'd go over to my friend's house and we'd find his older brother had a Playboy or something, and we'd run to the basement and giggle and look at it. We kind of got our information for ourselves, but the schools would send letters home and say, talk with your kids. We're just going to ask if kids know these things. And part of it was we were getting into human studies and science class about reproductive. And this was about the 8th grade. So we were talking about like the uterus and reproduction and things. So they said, make sure you have the talk with your kids. Again, the condom thing was when they started to bring that into schools and say, hey, it's important that kids know that if they have questions, someone can answer them. But again, it was like a 10-minute thing where our gym teacher put a condom on a banana and then just kind of said, okay, now go run laps. If you have questions, go ask your parents. Like they didn't want to do it. Right. It it was, I wish it was still like that. It's child survivor of assault more than once. My wife is a survivor of assault. At least we believe, because a lot of her childhood she can't even remember. Her father was accused by another family member of assault, and we firmly believe she was assaulted. And I seen what it's done to her mental state. And God, I hope she doesn't kill me for talking about this. But I see it with her to a degree where I go, God, a lot of your childhood is blocked out. Now, I have a very photographic memory where I can still remember things that went on when I was 5 years old. I sometimes sit with my dad and talk about things that happened when I was like 5, 6 years old, and he's amazed that I can still remember a lot of details when it comes to the weather, when in the year something happened, what was discussed. Even with my wife, I met my wife in high school, and it always blows her mind that I can tell her what time of day I met her, what outfit she was wearing, where I was sitting, and the discussion we had. And when I bring it all up, it just hits her, and she goes, "Yeah, God, I can't believe you remember all of that." So I can't understand what it's like for her to have to block out the majority of her childhood. Anytime there's times where we've watched a movie or something from the 80s, and I'll go, "You didn't see this movie when you were a kid?" And she'll say, "I can't remember. I can't remember," because it gets blocked out. It's terrible. Caused by trauma. Yeah, absolutely. It took my mother's death for me to dig back and remember what was done to me. Until that time, I couldn't remember my childhood. I'm very sorry to hear that, Lynn. And my condolences on your mother. That's terrible. I remember being in my crib and my dad shaving his head bald. Oh Jesus. Well, there you go. So I've got some memories of like 3 to 4 years old that aren't as good as like 5, 6 and up. But God, if you can remember those things, I mean, geez, that's that's incredible. That's good. That's great. So we're coming up on the 1 hour mark, folks. That's probably going to wrap things up for this stream. And again, be on the lookout for tomorrow. I'm going to have a video on this on the Trudeau China stuff that's going on right now. I may do a video on the groomers as we get into next week. I'm going to see what develops over the weekend. Actually, I should share the screen really quick because I have a question for everybody. Because with the Chinese scandal, I started talking about with our newest book on Tamara Leach, Hold the Line, the Ballad of Tamara Leach. I've been sitting in interviews and people have said, "What's next for an Unacceptable Fringe?" And I said, I think we're taking a break from political books because we didn't want to be boxed in. My illustrator and I want to tackle culture wars. We wanted to tackle groomers. We wanted to tackle a bunch of stuff that people have on their minds, but they don't want to say out of concern for shock value. We don't mind coming out and speaking of things. But then I got an idea today, and I did a mock tweet of a fake cover of what we could do a book about. And well, I kind of wanted to get your guys' input before we call it a day. I don't know what you guys would think if we did something like this. Now, of course, we would have to draw Winnie the Pooh a little bit differently because we can't strictly steal from Disney. But and it wouldn't be called A Gift for Pooh, because this is actually a story that Disney has put out. I just took the cover for the sake of mocking up my idea as to maybe a book we should do going forward, maybe our next book. I don't know what you guys think. If you guys think well, see, so the joke with Winnie the Pooh is that everybody's always said that G looks like Winnie the Pooh. So we could actually get away with it by making him look like Winnie the Pooh. I think it'd be funny because, I mean, we've already got Justin Trudeau in our books, and well, we haven't been sued yet. But when it comes to Xi, I mean, he's banned Winnie the Pooh in China because everybody said he looked like Winnie the Pooh. So I don't know. I don't know if that's something you guys think would be a good idea to do a book of that going forward. I think it'd be great. I think it would be funny. We could definitely find some ways to twist that around and make it a laugh. But yeah, well, if you're watching this after the stream, make sure to comment down below if you think that's a good idea for a book. If it's something you'd be interested in, let us know. or else, like I said, maybe we'll put that one on the back burner and see what develops as time goes on. I don't know. We're kind of weighing our options right now because we really put our foot in our mouths when it came to our last two books because we only had plans on releasing one. And as I solidified my friendship with Tamara, and we talked about the possibility of a book coming out in time for the convoy, the 1 year anniversary of the convoy, I put my foot in my mouth and said, "Of course we could do that. We could totally make that happen." And we literally finished one phase, two phase, and immediately began production on her book in order to have it out on time while my illustrator is full time in college. So I promised her we'd take a little bit of a break in between projects. So we're weighing our options. As long as you don't incur the wrath of the mouse. No, we'd find a way to do it. That we've had pictures of Winnie the Pooh in our other books. They're very subtle, but there is a way we can do it where it's parody is protected under fair use. So um, I'd have to consult with a lawyer as to how we would go about doing that because Disney, I imagine, would be relentless. But maybe we make him look like G. I don't know. Maybe we just put him in Winnie the Pooh's red shirt. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We got lots of time to figure that out. But folks, I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. I hope you enjoyed the little discussion we had here tonight. As I just really love talking with my community, and I guess that's why I just thought of last minute tonight. Let's do a live stream. If it is your first time here, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, turn on your bell for notifications, as I do tend to go live, as you can see, on a whim. We always go live on Sundays. I try to do my weekly wrap up before I start making my videos for the week. But yeah, I'll see you guys. We'll have our video for tomorrow, and then I'll see you guys on Sunday for our weekly wrap. I hope you guys have a great weekend and take care of yourselves. I'll catch you on the next one.